The red phone rang at 3 a.m. Moscow time. Vladimir Putin, the man who has controlled Russia with an iron fist for over 2 decades, received news that would send shockwaves through the Kremlin's ancient walls. Across the Atlantic, Donald Trump had just secured his return to the White House, and in that moment, everything changed. Intelligence sources revealed that what happened next inside the Kremlin was nothing short of extraordinary. Emergency meetings convened. Generals summoned. Oligarchs whispered nervously in gilded hallways. Because Putin knows something the world is only beginning to understand. Trump's victory isn't just an American political event, it's a seismic shift that could either save Russia from complete collapse or push it over the edge into chaos. But here's what makes this moment truly terrifying. Putin is cornered. The war he started has drained Russia's resources. Sanctions have crippled the economy. His inner circle is fracturing. Young Russians are fleeing by the thousands. And now, with Trump back in power, Putin faces the most dangerous gamble of his career. Will Trump be the deal-maker Putin desperately needs? Or will this reunion between two of the world's most unpredictable leaders end in betrayal? What you're about to discover goes beyond the headlines. We've pieced together classified intelligence reports, insider testimonies, and strategic analyses that paint a picture of a leader making moves that defy logic unless you understand what's really at stake. The next 10 minutes will reveal the hidden chess game being played at the highest levels of global power, where one wrong move could trigger consequences none of us are prepared for. This is the story they don't want you to know. This is Putin's endgame. If you want to stay ahead of the mainstream narrative and discover what's really happening in global politics, hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you the analysis and insights that cut through the noise. Let's dive in. The relationship between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump has always been shrouded in mystery and controversy. But to understand what's happening right now, we need to go back to where it all began. When Trump first entered the White House in 2017, Putin saw opportunity. Here was an American president who spoke differently about Russia, who questioned NATO's relevance, who seemed willing to challenge the post-Cold War order that had kept Russia contained. But things didn't go as Putin planned. Despite Trump's rhetoric, his administration actually increased sanctions on Russia. Military aid flowed to Ukraine. The State Department remained hawkish. Putin realized that the American deep state was more powerful than any single president. Still, Trump represented something Putin valued: unpredictability. In a world where Western leaders moved in lockstep, Trump was the wild card. Fast forward to today. Russia is bleeding. The military operation in Ukraine has turned into a grinding war of attrition. Over 300,000 Russian casualties. An economy held together by oil revenues and Chinese support. International isolation deeper than anything since the Cold War. The ruble's value fluctuating wildly. And most dangerously for Putin, cracks appearing in the foundation of his power. Young, educated Russians have fled the country in numbers not seen since the Bolshevik Revolution. Moscow's tech sector has collapsed. The best and brightest are in Dubai, Istanbul, and Tbilisi, watching their homeland from afar with a mixture of sadness and relief. Inside Russia, whispers of discontent grow louder, even among the elite who built their fortunes under Putin's protection. This is the context for understanding Putin's reaction to Trump's victory. For the Russian president, Trump's return offers something priceless: a chance to reset, to negotiate, to find an exit from a situation that grows more untenable by the day. But Putin also knows that Trump is transactional, unpredictable, and surrounded by advisors who range from Russia hawks to isolationists who simply want to wash their hands of foreign entanglements. Within hours of Trump's victory being confirmed, Putin's team went into overdrive. The public response was measured, a carefully worded congratulations that said much by saying little. But behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. Sources indicate that Putin convened his Security Council for an emergency session that lasted through the night. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, FSB, Director Alexander Bortnikov, all the key players in Putin's shrinking circle of trust. The question on the table was simple but loaded with consequence. How do we leverage Trump's return to achieve our strategic objectives without appearing desperate? Because that's Putin's dilemma. He needs a deal, but he can't be seen as weak. He needs Trump's help to extract Russia from Ukraine with something that can be sold as victory to the Russian people. But he can't give away so much that he loses credibility with the hardliners who keep him in power: intelligence. Analysts have identified several scenarios Putin is likely considering. The first is the grand bargain. Offer Trump something he desperately wants, perhaps cooperation on China, perhaps dirt on Biden's family, perhaps something we don't even know about yet, in exchange for forcing Ukraine into a settlement that lets Russia keep Crimea and chunks of the Donbass. Trump gets to claim he ended a war Biden couldn't stop. Putin gets to avoid total humiliation, but here's where it gets complicated. Trump's team is divided. His incoming Secretary of State has made hawkish statements about Russia. His vice president has advocated for a stronger NATO. Meanwhile, Trump himself has said he could end the war in 24 hours. A Fabinsella claim that both excites and terrifies European allies who fear being sold out. Putin is reading all of this, calculating, probing for weaknesses. Russian cyber operations have intensified, not in attacks, but in intelligence gathering. They're mapping out who has Trump's ear, who can be influenced, who might be compromised. The Kremlin's propaganda machine is simultaneously preparing for two different narratives. One where Trump is hailed as the peacemaker who recognizes Russian security concerns, and another where he's painted as just another American imperialist if negotiations fail. What many people don't realize is that Putin's power, seemingly absolute from the outside, is actually quite fragile. He rules through a complex system of patronage, fear, and nationalistic fervor. The war in Ukraine was supposed to be quick and glorious, cementing his legacy as the leader who restored Russian greatness. Instead, it has become an albatross. The families of dead soldiers are starting to speak out. Videos of poorly equipped troops circulate on Russian social media despite censorship efforts. Economic pain is spreading beyond the major cities into regions that have historically been Putin's base of support. This fragility is why Trump's return is so critical. Putin needs a win, any win, that he can spin as justification for the enormous costs Russia has paid. He needs to tell his people that their sacrifices meant something, that Russia achieved its goals, that the motherland is secure. Without that narrative, the foundation of his rule begins to crumble. There's another dimension to this that often gets overlooked: Putin's personal psychology. Intelligence profiles describe a man obsessed with historical greatness, with being remembered as the leader who reversed Russia's post-Soviet humiliation. He sees himself in the tradition of Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, leaders who expanded Russian power and influence despite enormous obstacles. The idea of being remembered as the president who led Russia into decline is intolerable to him. This psychological factor makes Putin both more dangerous and more desperate. A leader who cares primarily about legacy is capable of irrational escalation if he believes his place in history is at stake. It's why the nuclear rhetoric from Russia, though often dismissed as bluffing, can never be entirely discounted. For Putin, leaving a legacy of strength might be worth almost any risk. Now let's talk about what Putin is actually doing in response to Trump's victory. Multiple sources indicate that Russia has initiated back-channel communications with Trump's transition team. These aren't official diplomatic channels. Those remain frozen in many respects, but rather informal contacts through business associates, former officials, and intermediaries in countries friendly to both sides. The messages being sent through these channels are reportedly focused on one central theme. There's a deal to be made that serves both our interests. Putin is betting that Trump's ego and desire to be seen as a historic deal-maker will override the institutional resistance within the American government. He's probably right to some degree. Trump has never hidden his fascination with strong leaders or his belief that he alone can solve problems that stumped his predecessors. The question is whether Trump's deal-making instincts will be constrained by political reality, congressional opposition, and pressure from European allies. Meanwhile, on the military front, Russia has made subtle but significant adjustments. There's evidence of a partial pullback of forces in certain sectors, possibly as a goodwill gesture or perhaps simply to consolidate positions that are more defensible. At the same time, Russian forces have intensified efforts in other areas, possibly trying to gain leverage before potential negotiations. This is classic Putin. Always position yourself to negotiate from strength, even if that strength is partly illusion. The economic picture is equally complex. Russia has been preparing for this moment by diversifying away from Western financial systems, building stronger ties with China, India, and other non-Western powers. The ruble has been stabilized through capital controls and central bank interventions. Oil revenues, though lower than pre-sanction levels, still provide enough cushion to keep the government functioning. But everyone knows this is unsustainable in the long term. Russia needs either a return to global markets or a dramatic restructuring of its economy, neither of which is possible without some resolution to the current crisis. What does all this mean for the rest of the world? If Trump and Putin do reach some kind of agreement, the implications are staggering. European security architecture could be fundamentally redrawn. Ukraine might be forced into accepting territorial losses in exchange for security guarantees that may or may not be reliable. NATO's cohesion could be tested like never before. The signal sent to other authoritarian leaders would be clear. Aggression can pay off if you're patient and strategic enough. But there's also a scenario where this all falls apart spectacularly. Trump's hawkish advisors could prevail. Congress could block any attempts to lift sanctions or reduce support for Ukraine. European leaders could push back hard against any deal that sacrifices Ukrainian sovereignty. In that case, Putin faces a nightmare. He gambled on Trump being his ticket out, and instead finds himself even more isolated, with domestic pressure mounting and no clear path forward. The Russian people themselves are caught in the middle of this high-stakes game. Most get their news from state-controlled media that paints a distorted picture of reality. But information still seeps through, especially among younger, more internet-savvy Russians. They see the economic stagnation, the closed borders, the friends and family who have left. They compare their lives to peers in other countries and wonder if the path Russia has taken is truly leading to greatness or just deeper isolation. There's a generational divide opening in Russia that Putin's government is struggling to manage. Older Russians, raised on Soviet narratives and nostalgic for superpower status, largely support Putin's confrontational stance. Younger Russians, especially those with education and international connections, are far more skeptical. They want opportunity, freedom to travel, connection to the wider world, things that Putin's policies have increasingly denied them. This divide will only deepen as the consequences of current policies become more apparent as we watch this drama unfold. It's important to remember that Putin is not acting in a vacuum. He has a network of advisors, intelligence services, and power centers that all have their own interests and agendas. Some genuinely believe in Russian nationalism and the fight against Western hegemony. Others are simply trying to protect their wealth and positions. Still others may be looking for ways to transition Russia toward a post-Putin future, though they must be extraordinarily careful given the risks of appearing disloyal. The next few months will be crucial. Trump takes office in January, and from that moment, the real negotiations or confrontations will begin. Putin will be watching every move, every appointment, every statement for clues about where American policy is heading. His team will be preparing proposals, leverage points, and fallback positions. The Russian propaganda machine will be ready to spin whatever happens in the most favorable light possible. What should we be watching for? Several indicators will tell us which direction this is heading. First, personnel, who Trump appoints to key positions, will signal whether he's serious about pursuing détente with Russia or maintaining pressure. Second, early statements and tweets. Trump's unfiltered communications often reveal his thinking before official policy is formed. Third, European reactions. If European allies start expressing alarm, it's a sign that Trump may be considering moves that break with traditional Western unity. We should also watch what happens inside Russia itself. Any signs of policy shifts, changes in military posture, or adjustments in propaganda narratives will indicate how confident Putin feels about reaching an accommodation with Trump. If we see more openness, more moderate rhetoric, it suggests Putin believes a deal is possible. If we see continued hardline positions and escalatory rhetoric, it means Putin is hedging his bets or has concluded that Trump won't deliver what he needs. The human cost of all this political maneuvering is staggering and often forgotten. Thousands continue to die in Ukraine. Families are torn apart. Entire cities have been reduced to rubble. Millions of people have become refugees. Young men on both sides are being fed into a meat grinder of industrial warfare. And for what? So that leaders can claim victory, save face, or secure their legacies. The gap between the strategic calculations of power and the lived reality of ordinary people has rarely been so stark. This is why the Putin-Trump dynamic matters so much. These two men, whatever you think of them personally, hold in their hands the power to either end this catastrophe or let it continue spiraling. Their egos, their calculations, their deals or failures to deal, all of it has real consequences for real people. It's not abstract geopolitics. It's life and death, prosperity and poverty, hope and despair for millions. As we conclude, consider this. We're living through a hinge moment in history. The post-Cold War order is collapsing. New power structures are emerging. The rules that governed international relations for decades are being rewritten in real time. Putin's response to Trump's victory is just one chapter in this larger story, but it's a critical one. How these two leaders navigate the next few months could determine whether we slide toward a new era of great power conflict or find some way to step back from the brink. The stakes couldn't be higher. Putin is desperate but dangerous. Trump is unpredictable but potentially open to deals that others wouldn't consider. The rest of the world is watching anxiously, hoping that wisdom prevails but preparing for the possibility that it won't. In the end, we're all passengers on this runaway train, hoping the conductors can find the brakes before it's too late. Stay informed. Stay skeptical. And above all, stay aware that what happens in the corridors of power in Moscow and Washington affects us all, no matter where we live or what we believe. This is our world, and these are our times. We owe it to ourselves to understand them as clearly as we can.